Have you ever greeted someone in the street, convinced that you know them, only to find out that they're a complete stranger? Or mistaken a tree root for a snake? Thought you saw something in the shadows when it was just a trick of the light? Or tried to use your phone to change the channel on the TV? This type of cognitive confusion, mistaking one thing for something entirely different, is quite common in the world of risk management. And just like its non-risk counterpart, risk cognitive confusion can lead to inappropriate behaviour with unexpected results. Risk cognitive confusion occurs when we confuse risks with things that are not risks. Then we treat those non-risks as if they really were uncertainties that matter. Risk management manages risk. That's obvious, right? But if we confuse non-risks with risks, and then we try to manage those non-risks using the risk process, we shouldn't be surprised if the risk process doesn't seem to work very well. We'll also be focusing on the wrong things, ignoring the real risks that we really should be managing. Clearly, it's important for us to identify the real risks in our projects and businesses and not to get distracted with non-risks that we should be addressing in some other way outside of the risk process. There are two ways in which we can confuse risks with non-risks. The first is to imagine that the cause of a risk is the risk itself. But causes of risk are certain. They're present now. They are facts and conditions that give rise to risk. They're not uncertain, so they're not risks. Causes of risk might include requirements or constraints or problems or issues. For example, if we're required to use new technology on our project, well, that isn't a risk because it's not uncertain, it's required. But it could be a cause of risk. We might have problems in the test phase because we're not familiar with the new technology, or we might not. Or if we have a difficult relationship with our client, that isn't a risk, but it might cause risks. If we don't get the information we need when we need it, or if our client demands additional audits and reviews because he doesn't trust us. The other main result of risk cognitive confusion is to mistake risks with their effects. So things like accidents or delays or failing to get our product accepted by the client, well, these aren't risks, they're the effects of risks that might or might not happen. But if they did happen, they'd produce these results. I've seen hundreds of risk registers over the years, and over half the things written down in a typical risk register aren't risks at all. This is risk cognitive confusion at work, confusing risks with non-risks and then trying to treat those non-risks through the risk process. It's not surprising that some people think risk management doesn't work when they're not using it for the real risks. The answer, of course, is to be clear about what really is a risk and what isn't, to ensure that our risk descriptions clearly distinguish between the causes of a risk, the risk itself, and the effects of that risk if it happens. Only by treating risk cognitive confusion can we be sure that risk management is really managing risk. You've heard a little about one of these risk ailments, but in fact there are 10. To explore this ailment in greater detail, why not invite me to speak at your conference or in-house event, or read my book, or engage the Risk Doctor Partnership for consultancy support. The other risk ailments are introduced in the rest of the videos in this series, with full details in the book.